So I really want to focus on the art as therapy because that's exactly like that trend that you're seeing with your community. That is it. It's like the amazing healing potential and relaxing potential in doing an activity like calligraphy, which is so, so supportive. So the reason why it feels so good is because it activates the body's relaxation response, and which in itself is really therapeutic.
Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and this week I'm talking to Emily Paris, who I've been waiting to have on the show for years. I'm not exaggerating, and I talk about that in this video. But she's walking us through something so interesting to me, which is art therapy, and why calligraphy is such great art therapy. I've heard from so many of you over the years that calligraphy has turned into your form of therapy, and I always wondered why, and this episode just makes so much sense. Emily walks us through what art therapy is, why it works so well, how it works, and then she actually walks us through 2 different exercises, both of which I had like these huge aha moments, and I explain them in the episode. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So I kid you not, I have been wanting to have this conversation for a really long time, and I've been waiting for the perfect person because it's not a topic that I just like want to have the average Joe come in and talk about. It's like a pretty serious topic, and it just felt like it had to be the right person. So I hadn't recorded it yet, and I didn't know who I was going to record it with, and then this like fateful moment happened. So for everybody, I mean, nobody's going to know this, but we have known each other for a very long time, but in like a small capacity. So we have a very close mutual friend that we're both very close with, but it never made us close. So we knew each other, but not really knew each other. And then that mutual friend got married a couple years ago, and we were both at her bachelorette. So we were on a hike, and I think we just happened to be walking beside each other on this hike, and we were small talking as you do when you don't really know somebody. And I, like, as a side note, I remember thinking like, she has like a very calming energy. She's like a very calm, like, you know, like a comforting person. I feel like I knew you better than I did. Maybe it's just because we knew each other for so long. But anyway, we were talking, and then you said that you were about to go to school for art therapy. And I was like, had this moment where I was like, wait, this is the person I've been waiting for. But then I was like, wait, she actually hasn't studied it yet. So I want her to come on the show and talk about it, but I can't until she actually studies it. So this was like, anyway, I don't know if you remember that, but I was just like, okay, well, whenever you're done, you have to come on my YouTube show because I need to interview you about this. And you were just like, really? Okay. Like, I don't know anything about it yet. But anyway, it was just like such a funny moment because I knew at that time that you were the perfect person to come on, but that I would have to wait a couple years to have you. So this episode is a long time coming, and I'm so excited to have you on. But for the people, can you explain who you are, what you do, how like this all came to be for you?
Yeah. And by the way, love the fateful introduction. It's true. It was like, it was destined, and it happened in the woods, and it was just like 2 minds coming together. It was awesome. So yeah, I agree. Long time coming, and I'm super happy we get to have this conversation. And I'm happy that I get to share this now with your community, which I feel like, as you said, is the perfect connection between what you guys all do and what you're passionate about, and also the potential of art for healing. So my name is Emily Paris. I'm an art therapist, and I live in Elmer, Quebec, which is just across the river from Ottawa. And essentially, what I do is that through art therapy, I help people access the fullness of who they truly are. More self-compassion, emotional freedom, inner peace, sort of this whole beautiful range of creative self-care that is facilitated through the art therapy process. And it's a really beautiful process, which I knew I had already fallen for when I met you, when we had talked about it. And as I learned more and more about it, it's just mind-blowing and really, really supportive for all of us, I believe. So I'm a huge advocate for it. And I'd love to tell you how I got into it too, because I feel like it's probably similar strain as many of us.
Yeah,
Should
that
I
was
go?
going to be my next question.
Yeah.
And like,
Okay.
I mean, you said you just got like drawn to it, but no pun
Yeah.
intended. But,
Yeah.
but like, of course you probably had, I don't think that the average person would have just been like, I think art would be good therapy. Like there was obviously a
Right.
moment that triggered that in you. So
Yeah.
what's the story?
Yeah, there was a couple moments actually. So I have a background in design. I have a BFA in design from Concordia and worked as a graphic designer for many years. So I've always been really connected to my creative flair, and creativity, like so many of us, is a really big part of my daily life. But the other part of it is that I've been, like full disclosure, I've been struggling with anxiety for most of my adult life. And there's a lot of different healing paths that I explored, talk therapy, all kinds of stuff. And what I noticed for myself was that art making was actually one of the most therapeutic activities that I could do, and really, really helped me with my anxiety. A few years ago, I began doing clay making and like throwing clay on the wheel. And I noticed myself that when I was doing that, I was so absorbed in that moment. I felt so calm. All of my worries, all of my stresses were just hushed. And I was really present in that moment. And that was like, it was like a breath of fresh air for my soul. She just like ate it all up and wanted more. So that was sort of the beginning. And then a few years later, as someone who I love very much, had quite of a severe mental health struggle. And through that experience, I had access to the mental health community and the care system in Quebec. And I spent a lot of time at the psychiatric ward and sort of getting to know the people in that world. And I met some beautiful, beautiful souls on the patient side. And what I started to notice was that there was a real lack of sort of healing modalities that could fit different ways of expressing the self. And so I want to talk more about what exactly art therapy is all about in a minute, but really healing modalities that were nonverbal. You know, there's a heavy focus on talk therapy in our healthcare system because it's known, it's sort of like the standard. But there seemed to be a lack of access to alternative healing modalities that were a little bit more gentle, compassionate, and person-centered. And that's when it really clicked for me that I wanted to be one of those voices that could bring something new and something fresh to these people who so desperately were looking for a way to heal, and a new way to heal that was supportive to them. So that was like the click moment, and it all came together. I discovered art therapy. I went to Vancouver to study art therapy at the Vancouver Art Therapy Institute, and I've just moved back here to open my practice. So that's me
I
in a nugget.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple different like things to say about that. I feel like, and I said this already, that I think the average person who might be struggling with anxiety or any other issues that art therapy might help with, it probably wouldn't be the first thing that would come to their mind unless they were already a creative person or unless they had been told to explore this as therapy. And so do you find that like that's sort of a barrier for people, is that you get a lot of people who are already creative, or is it sort of or is it something that you have to teach them uh separately from, like, you know, people who think they're not creative at all?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag. I'd say 50-50. It is a barrier in terms of people feel like they need to be good at art to
Yeah.
do art therapy. And it is so, so not about that. In fact, people who are better at art making or more skilled artists, sometimes art therapy is harder for them because they are already so much in their mind and they're really good at their skill and their technique. Certainly in the process, there's sort of this unlearning of you need to be good at art, and it's much more process based and just expression based. But yeah, I get that a lot. People are like, I don't know how to draw. I'm not going to do this. I'm like, you can. We
Yeah,
can. Yeah.
I can definitely see that, because I feel like as a person who, you know, I'm good at calligraphy, if I was to sit
Mhm.
down and do a different type of art as therapy, it would probably stress me out until
Yeah.
I could let go of that. But the interesting thing for me, and where this is all going to come together for me and my audience, is that I notice so many, like if this was a trend I noticed that I was not expecting when I first started teaching calligraphy, is the number of people who came to me and said that, well, they had never had a creative hobby before, and that this
Mhm.
was really like freeing for them, and that it was becoming part of their therapy, and that they in them, like they already had anxiety, and they noticed that even not doing it purposely, they didn't pick up calligraphy to reduce their anxiety, but that it was just a happy side effect of wanting to learn calligraphy. Like the number of people who have said that to me is insane. I never ever expected that, and I think it's so so cool. So I definitely want to dive into like why that is, what the actual, like, you know, in layman's terms, what the psychology of that is and why that's such a big thing. But yeah, I definitely wanted to just, I'm glad we covered the bases that you don't have to naturally be a creative person to be
Yeah.
able to do it. And in fact, a lot of the people who started calligraphy with me in the beginning weren't creative at all and discovered that they
Mhm.
are, and then it all just kind of became this beautiful accident, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy accidents, the
Yeah,
best kind.
yeah.
That's
Is that a
such, I
Bob Ross
love,
thing?
yeah. Happy
Call
little
them happy.
trees.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that, because I think it, especially any kind of access point that people can get into a creative flow, whether it's calligraphy or like ceramics, any way point of entry there, it opens us up to this alternative way of being, especially nowadays. I'm going to sound like such a geezer, but nowadays, you know, we're all online and social media, and there's a heavy focus on the digital, and really having time to reconnect with the physical and just like be here now with yourself. And just that is like so, so therapeutic. And yeah, I will definitely walk us through why that feels so good.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, because we didn't mention it yet, like Emily is going to walk us through a couple exercises that I think will be really great for anybody, even if you already are creative and you already know that this is a thing that helps you. I think um, those exercises will be just another thing to add to the repertoire. But before that, yeah, can we talk about like a little deeper, what is art therapy? Why is it
Mhm.
so powerful, and all of those good, juicy things?
Yeah, so juicy. There's so much to say, so I'm really going to be concise so we can get to those sort of stress reduction, art therapy inspired exercise. But there's a few different streams. So in essence, art therapy, it lives at the intersection of art making and psychology. It's a process that's led by a trained professional like me. Um, and in Canada and the US, you have to have sort of a master's level education in fine arts and areas of psychology to be able to do this work, to call yourself an art therapist. And it's this really gentle process of self inquiry. I like to say that it uses sort of the creativity or the creative intelligence in all of us that we all have. Some of us haven't accessed it for a really long time, but it's there. And it uses that creative intelligence towards our own healing, towards our own well being. It's so gentle. It's really person centered. So it's not the type of therapy where there's an expert and you're lying on the couch and they're just like, you know, judging, taking notes, joking, but not. Essentially, it's therapy that doesn't feel like therapy. It's really playful, it's creative, and it's very interactive. And it's something that opens up a whole new way of communication. So, really, in art therapy, one of the key elements that we're using is art making. And we use everything that's available to us. So, anything from paint, clay, you name it, it's there. Pencil, crayons, markers. We use written word, body expression, the whole nine yards. It has a place in art therapy. And the reason why art is so important and what's so powerful about it in the therapeutic process, well, one of the reasons, there's so many, but is that it gives a voice to the unspeakable. So, so much of us, so much of our memories, so much of our experiences are just nestled in our subconscious mind. So that's limiting beliefs, suppressed memory, traumatic memory. It's all sort of like pocketed there. Sometimes it's not conscious anymore. Sometimes we've sort of like brushed it away. Um, and sometimes there are no words to describe or explain what we are experiencing or what we have experienced. And we see that a lot with the people that we work with who have PTSD, post-traumatic stress. There are just no words. It's like it goes beyond the words. And that's when the image comes in. It lets us express non-verbally really complex emotions, feelings, and thought.
So what I think is so interesting about what you've said so far is that and what like to me would be really powerful as someone who is admittedly bad at expressing my feelings
Mm-hmm.
verbally. And I think that like just that alone would be so
Yeah.
powerful for me. Not because that I don't even know about the emotions, which I think is probably another piece of it, but because
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't sit down with a therapist and just naturally like spit out all the things I'm feeling.
Right.
The fact that I could express it without saying anything would just in itself be super powerful.
Yeah, it is. And for children, adolescents, and adults alike, like across the whole range, it can be really how we feel inside can be extremely complex. And exactly, the English language, any language, is sometimes not enough. And some of us are really not used to using those words. And it is really powerful. I'm actually I had a client consultation recently, and of course I won't give any details for confidentiality, but um, she had a traumatic experience and she was so stuck on how to move forward because she couldn't talk about it. It just like there was no words to explain what happened. There was no like story. It was just so it shut down. And so through the art, she was able to express it. And just the fact of expressing it, getting it from inside here to outside on the page, even if no one sees it, is beneficial because you're all of a sudden, it's not this like scary thing inside, it's in front of you. And when it's in front of you, you can talk to it, you can maybe have a conversation or put it away. You have all of a sudden more control and it's externalized. And so it feels really, really good for a lot of people. So I'm so glad to hear that
Yeah.
from you.
Okay, awesome. We'll let you continue. I won't interrupt again.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, so as I mentioned, really, their art therapy is super beneficial across a wide range of client demographics, age, but also what we're here for. So if you're looking for if you have emotional distress or post-traumatic stress, or you're looking to increase your self-esteem, or maybe just feel stuck around something and want to work through it, art therapy can be really supportive. So there's sort of two streams of art therapy that we use together, we weave together. And I really want to focus on this because this brings us back to that calligraphy and sort of the amazing healing powers or the relaxing powers of doing calligraphy and that kind of activity. So the two streams, we have art as therapy, so which focuses on the beneficial aspect of the process of art making, and I'll get that into that in a second. And then there's also art in therapy, which is more of a focus about what the image brings up, what it the content we cultivate almost or harvest from our subconscious, and working through that. So I really want to focus on the art as therapy because that's exactly like that trend that you're seeing with your community. That is it. It's like the amazing healing potential and relaxing potential in doing an activity like calligraphy, which is so, so supportive. So the reason why it feels so good is because it activates the body's relaxation response, and which in itself is really therapeutic. So it engages the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps lower our heart rate. Some people call that the rest and digest space. So when we're engaged in activity that uses our body, so for example, calligraphy, and we're focused on it in enough of a level that we're sort of stretching ourselves, like we're focusing, we're present, we, first of all, that engages the parasympathetic nervous system by just getting grounded back into the body. So all of a sudden you're not up here in your thoughts, but you're down here in your body, you're feeling your arm move, and you're really engaged in that moment. And
It sounds like it's, sorry to interrupt you again, but
yeah, go
as
ahead.
I said I would, and now I am. It sounds like if anybody listening has ever meditated, which I
Yeah,
do, I'm not perfect at it, but I try. It sounds like the same kind of effect that would happen when you focus on your breath, or you focus on like a gem in your hand or something.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, totally.
but you're focusing instead on your hand and what your hand is doing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. 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 It's sort of like a moving meditation almost. It really brings you into that meditative state. And for a lot of people, actually, especially when you have anxiety, speaking from experience, it can be really hard to sit quiet, close your eyes, and meditate. Because then you're like, oh, hey, party that's going on inside my brain. What's up? Tell me your news. And the thought starts to roll and it becomes like really chaotic. So, meditating in a way where you're actually focusing on something, whether it's a gem or your hand and the calligraphy, really helps bridge that gap for those who struggle with that sort of mindfulness technique.
Yeah,
Um,
it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, like why
yeah,
that would be relaxing.
yeah, yeah, and it gets us into a flow state, which I don't know if you're familiar with Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which I'm not even going to try to spell that. He wrote this amazing book called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And he's a positive psychologist. And he talks about the state of flow, which a lot of people call being in the zone. And he says that this is the optimal state of human experience. It's when we're fully engaged in the activity that we're doing, whether it's gardening or calligraphy or cooking. We're fully engaged in that moment, and we're so fully present that all of a sudden the chatter of the mind, the monkey mind, or external stressors start to fade away, and we are just there. We're present, we're engaged. And to be in that flow state, you need to be doing something that stretches your skill set a little bit and that requires focus, which calligraphy I feel like is exactly that. So it's relaxing, but at the same time you're really focused and present, and you're intentional with your movement. And that is like a recipe for success in terms of pushing you into that flow state. And in the flow state, have you ever felt so in the zone you like don't see the time passing and you're just like having a joyous time? Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's that. Yeah.
I mean, when people tell me that so I have never experienced anxiety in like the true sense of what it means to have anxiety issues.
Mm,
But when people tell me that this is helping, I just understand why
yeah.
innately, because when I first started doing calligraphy, I remember having that feeling of being in
Yeah.
flow and just like I wanted to do nothing else because it felt so good. Like I would just sit there and be completely immersed in it and forget what happened that day at work, or forget
Mm,
the fight I was having, or whatever it is. So I completely get it. And
yeah.
it just, yeah, like again, it just makes so much sense that it's
Yeah.
helpful for anxiety as well.
It really does. It's actually like the perfect storm to bring your body into that state. And so when you're in the flow state, just to recap, when you're in that state of flow, you're super present. You're not perseverating or on the track of whatever is going on in your external life. You're breathing more deeply, you're present in the moment. And so that's when the parasympathetic nervous system engages, and all of a sudden your body starts to lower your heartbeat, your blood pressure, like everything just like slows down. And that in itself is like, it's basically like a massage for your soul. Like it just feels so good, and is relaxing. It's extremely relaxing, which is just therapeutic in itself. I think giving ourselves the most opportunities to get ourselves in that space of relaxation.
You said you were going to put it like concisely, and I think you did. Like that's perfect. I know that you could probably go on for a really long time about like the science and the psychology about
Totally.
all of it. But I'm just curious, and I think
Yeah.
people listening are probably curious too. So let's say somebody wanted to do an art therapy session with you.
Mhm.
Give me like a rundown of what that would actually look like if they went into your office.
Yeah, totally. Great question. So I want to speak briefly about art in therapy. So how we use the artwork in therapy. So that question is sort of like a nice little patch
Okay.
over. I'll tell you about the architecture of a session, or sort of like the shape of a session, I like to call it. It sounds more artsy. So typically sessions are 1 hour. I'm doing sessions online right now through Zoom because of the quarantine, but typically it would be at my studio. So you'd come in, all of the art material would be there. Everything you can dream of probably is there. It's like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say just seeing all of that is therapy in
yeah,
itself for me.
you're just like, yeah, yeah. And then you leave and we're done. Just kidding. Yeah, so sessions are an hour. You come in, we usually do a little bit of a check-in, verbal check-in, see how you're doing, what's present for you in your life. Every session is different. I need to add that caveat because it's so person-centered and focused on what's present in that moment for that client. But if we're going to speak generally, is what it would look like. So we would do a little check-in, then I would guide you in a art exercise. Sometimes it's very directive in terms of what you're doing. So I'll ask you to illustrate something specific. So, or sometimes it's much more spontaneous and really led by the client. So we would do art for a little bit and then maybe 20, 25 minutes. And if we're doing art with imagery, so if we're focusing on art in therapy, which I'll explain in a moment, we would look at the artwork and then start dialoguing with it and use it as a tool for processing what's coming up and for finding guidance on where to move forward next. So that's sort of a vague shape of it, if that makes sense. So yeah, just before we move on to the exercises, I wanted to share a little bit about art in therapy. So how we use the artwork itself as a tool for healing and growth. Some of you have maybe heard of Carl Jung. He was very influential in the field of psychology. And he believed that art making was a form of communication from our subconscious, sort of like symbolic communication from subconscious levels of the self. And really in art making process, we access that subconscious. So it could be, as I mentioned earlier, limiting beliefs, suppressed memory, suppressed emotion. And when we engage creatively, we actually create a space for that content, if you will, to emerge and come onto the page or come into the sculpture. And it's really parts of the self that we haven't nurtured or looked at for a while that want to be expressed. And so once we do express them and bring them up, it gives us something to work on with the guidance of the art therapist. We can start to process it, heal it, and move forward from it. And I just want to say, just a little caveat is that it's really not about getting rid of these things completely or totally annihilating, memories or emotions. It's really about integration, so that they're no longer holding control over us. So it's something that's known, it's acknowledged, we've processed it, and then we can put it away and move forward with our lives. And that's a really important part of that like psychotherapeutic change. So art therapy is typically facilitated by a trained professional, but because of the quarantine and sort of everything that's going on in the world right now, we felt like it would be really great to offer some supportive art therapy inspired exercises that you could do on your own at home with the materials you have laying around. I feel like there's a lot more anxiety, stress, and worry circulating right now. So this is sort of just a little moment of juicy creative self-care to kind of take care of that beautiful heart of yours. So I've prepared 2 different exercises. And before we get started, I just want to talk through a couple of rules of engagement or things to remember when you're doing creative self-care. So number 1 is non-judgment. This is really a time to treat yourself to some non-judgmental art making. Just be kind with whatever comes through. Be very gentle and compassionate, and have a spirit of curiosity as you're moving through the process. The second, as I mentioned, is be compassionate and be gentle. So take this time to treat almost your creative voice or that creative intelligence as the like sweetest little child you've ever seen that just wants to communicate with you. So it's really just like chill vibes, and allow the image to come to you. And that's the third rule of engagement, is just with a spirit of curiosity, not trying to force anything to come through, just let things come. And actually, most importantly, number 4 is that this is a time for expression and not perfection. So I know a lot of us are skilled artists and we're used to creating the most beautiful lettering or images that anyone's seen in the world. And as opposed to that, this is sort of creative self-care is more of a safe space for you to create something and express yourself in a way that it doesn't even matter what it looks like at the end. It doesn't have to be beautiful. You can let yourself off the hook for that. And before we get started, I just wanted to share a quote by Pablo Picasso. And he says, "Art washes from the soul the dust of everyday life." And I think we can all relate to that because it is very healing in many ways. So the first exercise we're going to do is going to be more about that flow state that we talked about earlier. It's, I like to call it drawing the mindful breath. So with me, I like to do it on marker paper because it's super smooth, but you can just do it in your sketchbook or any kind of surface you have, literally. Today I have with me some markers, but you can do this exercise with pencil, crayon, pen, paint, go nuts. So really the point of it is to have a little self-care moment of moving meditation. So with this, you're going to first start by grounding yourself in the present moment. So really start by taking some deeper breaths and feel yourself coming back to the present moment. Imagine there's this beautiful sanctuary inside, and you're just taking a breath and you're kind of coming home to yourself, coming into your body. Maybe you feel the weight of yourself on the chair and you're feeling really present, and bring yourself here. And then you're going to take your mark making tool of choice and you're going to bring it to the page. And what you'll do is you'll start at the top of the page, so furthest away from you. And as you draw your breath in, so we're really going to be doing big inhales and big exhales. So outhales, that's a good way to put it. So you're going to inhale and pull the marker or the pencil towards you. And then as you exhale, you're going to draw it away from you like this. So you're going to be going up and down. And really it's about drawing the breath in, literally drawing it in, and then exhaling it out away from you. And just take those nice, long, deep breaths and find yourself sort of syncing up the way that you're drawing with the breath. And imagine this as almost your breath, if she could breathe or he could breathe. This is what she's drawing. It's just nice and relaxed, in and out. And then you might want to take, sort of start experimenting with your marker or your pencil and see where it takes you, and always bringing that synchronicity with the breath. Inhaling and exhaling and moving your page around, or moving your pencil around the page. And really practice being the observer in this moment. So notice what's happening in your body, notice any thoughts that are coming or emotions, and just noticing, not attaching to them. And as they're coming up, if there are things that are starting to crowd your mind, just return to the breath. And you can follow, if you want an extra point of focus, you can follow the drawing with your pencil, with your eyes, and just observe that line being moved around the page. And connecting the breath to your body, connecting the breath to the page. And for this, you can create a mantra if you have a mantra you like to use. And as you're breathing, you can just reflect on that mantra in and out. And that's a really great way to self-soothe. So a mantra could be something like, I am safe, I am here. I am safe, I am here. And really experiment. And what we're doing right now is we're attuning sort of our bodies and our breath and our mind. We're bringing it all into the space of relaxation. And what that does is that really engages our parasympathetic nervous system. It slows our heart rate. It relaxes our body. And it really gives us a chance to just breathe. So if you're experiencing anxiety or have racing thoughts, this is a really great way to nudge your mind, your thinking mind that might be having a party, back to something simpler. And so by following the breath on the page, gives you something to focus on, and it really helps bring you back into that state of calm. And you can do this exercise for as long as you need, or as much as you want, and maybe start to really experiment with the breath. Sometimes if people are experiencing anxiety and they have a really heightened like heart rate and they're starting to breathe or hyperventilate, actually drawing the breath, drawing how it feels in your body, and then actively slowing it down, intentionally slowing it down through the way you're drawing it, can really bring you back down into a state of calm. So that's the first exercise. It's really about appreciating art making as a process, and just using the breath to align yourself with a state of calm and relaxation, and calm the mind, calm the heart, and calm the body.
I have to chime in here because
Yes.
I just did it while you were talking. And
Awesome.
a couple things. The first thing is that I thought it was really interesting that even before you started this, I chose blue, because blue in my head is always how I picture my breath when I'm meditating, which is totally
Cool.
weird. But also that the first, and I've said this in my in-person calligraphy workshops, but the first calligraphy workshop I ever took, I remember the instructor, and she's still a friend of mine. I remember her saying that this is like, so in calligraphy, I don't know if you've ever done calligraphy, but on an upstroke, you do a light line, and on a downstroke, you do a thick line. And so it's really similar to what we just did, actually. And I remember
Cool.
the instructor saying to go really slowly and enjoy it, and take a deep breath in as you're going on the upstroke and a deep breath out as you're going on the downstroke. And so this is like, it's all coming so full circle why this is so perfect for calligraphy, because
Yeah.
it's like, it's exactly what I've been doing and why this
Yeah.
is so calming. And I actually, the only pens I had near my desk, apart from this 400 pens behind my back, but the ones that were right here were brush pens. And I just naturally found myself doing thick lines and thin lines, which is what you would do in calligraphy. It's like, it's just, I just had to share that because it's so perfect.
That is awesome. It's a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah, your calligraphy students must be the most relaxed community of the world,
They are
basically.
very kind people, so maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
I unintentionally put them in a calm space before they interact with me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You're basically like an art therapist in disguise.
Yeah. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna mute myself again and let you do the second one.
All right. Okay, so the second activity exercise is, earlier we talked about art as therapy, which what we just did was more in line with that, which is really sort of the process-based experience of it, therapeutic experience. The second exercise we're going to do is going to be art in therapy. So it's going to be, we're going to try to use the art as a way of almost like harvesting content from our subconscious that we can bring to the surface and then move through. So I like to call this exercise creative inner dialogue. You can use the materials. Again, I like to use this marker paper, but anything you have that is flat and you can draw on. And then Usually it's better to use marker or pencil crayon. Paint can get kind of messy for this one. So calligraphy markers, or anyways, literally anything you have that feels inspiring. And a journal or something to write with. We're going to be using that as well. So this exercise is about engaging the left and the right part of the brain and using our dominant hand and our non-dominant hand. And what this does is it helps for better integration between the two brain hemispheres. It also helps us access greater inner wisdom, inner guidance that might be in our subconscious mind. So it helps us sort of tap into that. And it really brings more inner clarity. It can unlock some great creative problem solving skills, access more of our intuition or our ability to feel through things and to understand how to move forward. So this is an activity that I do with my clients. So there's usually a part afterwards where we talk through it and sort of workshop that a little bit. But I'm going to show you how to use just your journal for some self-reflection, and hopefully it'll help you access greater inner wisdom. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be drawing with our non-dominant hand. So if you are left-handed, use your right. If you're right-handed, use your left. And then we're going to be journaling with our dominant hand. And what that does is it really helps integrate our conscious mind and our subconscious mind, and integrate our different ways of thinking. So our more intuitive thinking and our critical thinking mind. As well, which is actually perfectly suited for this community, because our thinking mind tends to be quite critical sometimes. I don't know about yours, but mine is. It can get in the way from accessing inner wisdom or sort of our intuition. So when we use our non-dominant hand that is untrained, so it hasn't learned how to draw, how to write yet, most of the time, what that does is that it really ushers our thinking mind out of the way because it doesn't have a place there. We start to have to rely on our feeling and our intuition to draw because it's just not trained. It doesn't have that critical thinking process attached to that, if that makes sense. So the first step is going to be to hold a question in your awareness. So connect inward and feel into a question or a situation that you'd like to have some clarity around, or you'd like to receive inner guidance for. And when you have that question, you'll hold it gently in your awareness. And then don't write it down yet, just hold it in your awareness, hang on to it, maybe tap into how it makes you feel. If it's a situation that has brought any kind of distress, just tap into that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your mark making tool, so for example, your pencil, and you're going to start to draw with your non-dominant hand on the page, on the piece of paper. And really give yourself permission to open to the process and to play, like just see what comes out. Treat your non-dominant hand, which is your subconscious mind, as just with a lot of curiosity, and treat her kindly. So whatever it wants to express, just let it express it. Don't judge it. Don't criticize how good it looks. Just let it come through and let yourself get lost for a few moments in that process. And typically, I recommend taking about 5 minutes. You can change colors, you can explore, and just explore with your non-dominant hand on the page. Might have an image that it's trying to create, might be just doodles, something abstract, and give yourself 5 minutes to really experience the fullness of that moment. And so step 3, 5 minutes passes. Step 3, what we would do then is that you would take a pencil or a pen in your dominant hand, and you would go through a process of journaling what came through. So for example, you might want to ask yourself, what does your image want to tell you? Are there any words? Are there any sentences or messages that came through while you were doing that non-dominant hand experiment? If it could speak, what would it say? So these are sort of journal prompts that you could use to guide you in that inquiry after you've completed your drawing. If there's a message or a story that it has to say, just allow yourself to sort of open to that free flow of writing. Any thoughts or emotions, write them down. And then you can start reflecting on the process together. So how do these two connect? What is the insight that's found here? And in my experience, this exercise can be really enlightening and surprising. Most of the time, we start this exercise and people are like, there's nothing that's going to come through. And it's just like a complete surprise when there's inner guidance or clarity that comes out of that experience. Most of us feel like we are conscious of everything that is in our thought mind or in our mind, and that we don't have really much inner guidance unless we're aware of it already. But what this process does is that it really allows an opportunity for that subconscious mind to speak up and share things that we're really, really not aware that are there, that are just hiding right below the surface. And it can be an amazing tool for accessing our intuition and really helping us creatively problem solve things that we're stuck around.
Okay, is it like gonna, I don't want to say break rules, but is it gonna like affect the quality of this if I share what mine was?
Oh, I think that would be amazing, actually.
Okay. So just to preface all of this, I've been doing a lot of like woo, what we would call woo woo stuff lately. A lot more like meditation, listening to a lot more like mindfulness stuff and reading a lot on that topic. And I went to a retreat like recently about like your energy and all this stuff.
Awesome.
I've never been that kind of person in the past, but I'm like, I think it's so interesting and it's starting to become something that I'm really aware of. And anyway, so like, I don't know if I would have been like this in tune with the meaning like instantly before as I am now, but that's besides the point. I thought I would share this because and obviously we just did this in like 30 seconds. This wasn't like the full 5-minute one, but this is what I drew in that like whatever 30 seconds it was.
Oh, okay.
You're like, you already know exactly what it means. Like, okay, but so I drew this thing first and then that long line, and then I drew this stuff all second. So like this side was done first and this was done second. And the question that I had in my mind, the first thing that I thought of that I like wanted to have guidance on was, right now during the whole quarantine thing and all of that, I've been feeling pressure on one side to be really productive because I have all this like quote unquote extra time, and I am feeling pressure on the other side to take this as like a moment to pause and like reflect. And so the question in my head was, should I be productive right now or should I be resting right now? And this is like rest and then productive on the other side. And so to me, in my head, it's like you should rest for a while and then you will cross this line into being productive and busy afterwards again. Like,
that's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah. I love that.
Inner guidance.
Yeah. So
Inner guidance. There it is.
I will definitely be like telling people that they need to do that and think about it. And I didn't even journal about it. That was just like instant
clarity.
Yeah. So I'm sure there'd be even more if we like really dug into it, but we don't need to do that. Publicly.
Do we really want to? Well, just kidding. I'm sure we do.
No, but both of those things I feel like are just so like so simple, but so powerful at the same time.
Yeah.
For people who are willing to actually like explore that within themselves. And I think that's another huge part of it, right? You have to be open to like learning these things. You can't be like, well, Emily's going to fix me just by, like you can't be closed off to it. Yeah.
And it really, exactly. Thank you for saying that, because it's true. there requires a commitment from the client, because what we're doing here is we're using your creativity towards your healing. So I'm more of a guide, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over here, we're going to go over here, asking certain questions, bringing you into a certain direction, but it really is your own creativity, like that exercise that you just did. It's your own creativity and your own wisdom that's bringing you that. And it's not really like traditional psychotherapy where there's the expert in the room and I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
It's really empowering, and it's super it's like the best kind of self-healing anyone could ask for. And it's so simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I think a lot of people will benefit from that, and just from all of the information that you've shared and understanding why even just their calligraphy is so calming. And I feel like
Yeah.
knowing that about it will make it just
Mm-hmm.
even more therapeutic. So
Yeah, totally.
So, okay, before we like shut this down, can you tell
Mhm.
people where they can find more from you, where they can, I mean, if they're local, they could even go check you out, but where can people find you?
So right now, the best way to find me is on my website at emilyparis.ca. And if you really like this activity, I'm actually sending out monthly sort of creative self-care activities in my newsletter subscription list. So just sign up for my newsletter and you'll be able to access more of this juicy stuff.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for coming on here. I put a lot of pressure on you by saying that I've been waiting for this for 2 years, but you did
Yeah.
not disappoint. And I'm so glad that we finally made it happen. So I have a feeling that I'm going to get some good feedback on this one. Well, you're going to get some good feedback on this one. And we might have to do like a 2.0 somewhere down the line.
I'm down. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We will talk again soon.
Okay, see ya. Bye.